Good morning, afternoon, everyone. I'm excited to welcome you to this presentation titled Comparing Interpretations of Moral Principles, an Overview. Today, we'll take a comprehensive look at some of the key moral theories and explore how they shape different ethical frameworks. I'm Presenter Name, and I'm looking forward to guiding you through these important ideas on presentation date. Let's dive in. Here we define 5 fundamental moral principles that guide ethical behavior. First, we have justice, symbolized by balanced scales, which is about ensuring fairness and equal treatment under laws and moral codes. Next is autonomy, represented by a user icon, emphasizing respect for individuals' rights to make their own informed choices. Then, beneficence, shown with a heart icon, focuses on actions that promote the well-being of others. Non-maleficence, indicated by a cross icon, means avoiding harm or injury to others, which is crucial in maintaining ethical standards. Lastly, fairness, illustrated by a handshake, involves treating people impartially and equitably in social and moral contexts. Together, these principles provide a strong ethical framework for our decisions and interactions. On this slide, we're taking a closer look at 3 major ethical theories that help us understand how to make moral decisions. First, there's deontology, which is all about following rules and duties. This theory emphasizes acting according to moral principles, regardless of the outcome. Think of it like a guidebook that tells you what's right or wrong based on established rules. Next, we have utilitarianism, which takes a different approach by focusing on the consequences of actions. The goal here is to maximize overall happiness or utility. So the right action is the one that brings the greatest good to the most people. Lastly, virtue ethics shifts the focus away from rules or outcomes and instead looks at the character traits and moral virtues that define a good person. This theory encourages cultivating qualities like honesty, courage, and kindness as a foundation for ethical behavior. The image on the right illustrates the delicate balance we often try to strike between competing values, in this case, nature and wealth, highlighting the complexity of ethical decision-making. Each icon here visually represents the essence of these theories. The book for deontology, symbolizing rules and principles, the balanced scale for utilitarianism, representing weighing outcomes, and the medal for virtue ethics, reflecting the importance of moral character. Here, we focus on the deontological interpretation of moral principles. The core idea is that moral duties are binding regardless of the outcomes they produce. This means that certain actions are considered right or wrong in themselves, independent of any consequences. For example, telling the truth or keeping a promise is a duty that should be upheld, even if breaking it might seem to lead to better results. This perspective emphasizes the importance of intention and adherence to moral rules as the foundation of ethical behavior. Here we see a bar chart illustrating the total utility scores for 3 different actions. The horizontal axis lists the actions, while the vertical axis shows their corresponding total utility scores. Action B stands out with the highest score of 90, indicating it produces the greatest overall well-being according to utilitarian principles. Action A has a moderate score of 65, and Action C scores the lowest at 40. This visualization clearly highlights the utilitarian focus on choosing the action that maximizes total happiness or benefit for the most people. It's a straightforward way to compare how different choices measure up in terms of their overall utility. Here we explore virtue ethics and its connection to moral principles. First, the main focus of this approach is on character. Instead of just following rules or weighing consequences, virtue ethics is about developing strong moral traits within ourselves. Think of it as building a shield that protects and guides our behavior. Next, cultivating virtues is essential. These moral qualities are shaped and nurtured through mentorship and role modeling. Just like a feather symbolizes lightness and growth, virtues grow when we learn from those who inspire us and lead by example. Finally, practical applications of virtue ethics extend into ethical frameworks, especially in policies and education systems. These frameworks emphasize character development as a foundation for ethical decision-making, aiming to balance principles fairly, much like the balanced scale icon here. Together, these ideas highlight how virtue ethics influences not just personal behavior, but also broader societal structures. Moral relativism is the idea that moral standards aren't fixed or universal, but instead depend on cultural or contextual factors. This means what's considered right or wrong can vary from one society to another. Because of this, moral relativism challenges the notion that we can have moral rules that apply universally across all cultures and situations. It suggests that ethical frameworks can't be one size fits all. They must account for cultural differences. For example, conflicts arise when cultures have differing moral practices. Relativism raises important questions about whether it's appropriate to impose a uniform approach to ethics in such cases. This is especially relevant in our increasingly globalized world, where a respectful understanding of diverse moral perspectives is crucial. The image here, showing various stamps with flags, coins, and the United Nations emblem, symbolizes this diversity of cultures and the complex interactions between differing moral viewpoints. Here we have a comparison of how 4 different theories emphasize key core values. The horizontal bar chart makes it easy to see these differences at a glance. For the value of rights, Theory A places the highest emphasis with a score of 8, while Theory D is much lower at 3. When it comes to outcomes, Theory D takes the lead, scoring an 8, showing a strong focus there. Character is most emphasized by Theory C, with a score of 9, indicating its priority in that approach. Lastly, cultural context is heavily valued in Theory B, with a score of 8, while Theory C places the least emphasis on it, with a 3. This visual highlights how each theory prioritizes different core values, helping us understand their unique perspectives more clearly. Here we have an overview of 4 major ethical interpretations, each with its own strengths and weaknesses. Starting with deontology, this approach offers clear rules and firm guidance based on universal principles. However, it can be rigid, sometimes struggling when duties conflict or when situations don't fit neatly into a rule. Next is utilitarianism, which focuses on outcomes, aiming for the greatest good for the greatest number. While practical, it faces challenges in measuring consequences accurately and can raise concerns about individual rights being overlooked. Moving on to virtue ethics, this interpretation emphasizes developing moral character rather than prescribing specific actions. It encourages personal growth, but may offer less concrete guidance and can vary widely across cultures. Finally, relativism takes a contextual approach, valuing cultural diversity and situational ethics. Though flexible, it can lead to moral uncertainty and difficulties in making universal judgments. Together, these perspectives help us navigate ethical decision-making, each bringing valuable insights as well as limitations to consider. Here, we're looking at how different interpretations influence moral frameworks, each with its own focus and challenges. First, rule-based frameworks rely on strict rules and codes to define what's moral. While they provide clear guidance, they can be rigid and struggle to adapt to new situations. Next, outcome-oriented policies emphasize the results of actions, using consequences to steer behavior. The challenge here is measuring outcomes accurately and navigating ethical ambiguities that can arise. Character development programs aim to cultivate virtues and moral character over time, promoting long-term personal growth, but they require sustained commitment and often rely on subjective judgment. Lastly, culturally adaptive guidelines recognize that moral principles need to be flexible, adjusting based on cultural contexts. This adaptability is valuable, but also introduces trade-offs due to variability and potential conflicts between differing cultural norms. Each of these approaches shapes our understanding of morality in unique ways, balancing clarity, flexibility, and ethical complexity. Here we have 3 practical scenarios illustrating how different moral frameworks guide decision-making. In Scenario A, focusing on medical resource allocation, deontology highlights the importance of fairness by following established rules. Utilitarianism aims to maximize health benefits for the greatest number, while virtue ethics encourages compassionate choices that reflect a caring character. Moving to Scenario B, which deals with a business ethics dilemma. Deontology stresses sticking to ethical duties and company policies. Utilitarianism evaluates decisions based on their impact on happiness for shareholders and stakeholders. At the same time, virtue ethics calls for integrity and empathy from leaders navigating these challenges. Finally, Scenario C addresses cultural conflict resolution. Here, relativism plays a key role by supporting respect for differing cultural norms and practices. On the other hand, universalism advocates for applying fundamental justice principles consistently across all cultures. This comparison helps us see how moral theories can both clash and complement each other in complex real-world situations. When addressing the challenges and reconciling divergent moral views, two major issues stand out. First, foundational disagreements arise from differing basic beliefs. These are deep-rooted convictions that shape how individuals see the world, and because they are so fundamental, they often lead to conflicts that are hard to resolve. You'll notice the thought bubble icon here, symbolizing the complexity of these underlying beliefs. Second, we encounter priority conflicts. This happens when conflicting values vie for precedence, making it difficult to reach a consensus. Even if people share some moral principles, deciding which values should take priority can cause tension. The balanced scale icon captures this struggle to weigh competing values fairly. Together, these challenges highlight why finding common ground in moral discussions is often so complicated. Here we focus on integrating various ethical perspectives into a cohesive framework that ensures consistent guidance. First, principle selection is about identifying the core ethical values that uphold fairness and justice in any situation. These principles form the foundation of our framework. Next, decision rules provide clear guidelines to apply these principles effectively across different scenarios, helping us navigate complex ethical dilemmas. Character cultivation emphasizes promoting virtues and moral development, encouraging behavior that goes beyond mere rule-following to embody ethical excellence. Finally, cultural adaptation reminds us to adjust our ethical considerations thoughtfully, to respect cultural differences and diverse contexts. Together, these elements create a balanced approach to ethical decision-making, as symbolized by the scale, highlighting the careful weighing of multiple factors. Here in our conclusion, we focus on how to choose and balance moral interpretations effectively. First, it's essential to clarify your aims. Defining clear goals before selecting a moral framework helps ensure everything aligns with your ethical objectives. Next, we need to weigh consequences and rights carefully. This means balancing practical outcomes alongside respecting individual rights to craft fair and just policies. Finally, it's crucial to enable revision and dialogue. By incorporating mechanisms for ongoing review and open conversation, we can adapt our ethical approaches as situations evolve, keeping them relevant and responsive. The image of the antique scale with apples beautifully symbolizes this balance between tradition and thoughtful consideration, reminding us that ethics often involves weighing different factors carefully.